My sister read my secrets hidden in the drawer and decided to tell the whole family at Sunday dinner, laughing as my mother's face turned to disgust and my father demanded I leave their house immediately. Claire stood there with my journal in her hands, reading my most private thoughts out loud while 20 relatives watched me crumble. But what she didn't know was that I'd been documenting her secrets for 6 months, and the folder on my laptop would destroy her perfect reputation far more thoroughly than she'd destroyed mine. I'm Ethan Moreau, 22 years old, and 3 hours ago I sat at my parents' dining table surrounded by aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents for what was supposed to be a celebration of my college graduation. My mother had prepared her famous coq au vin. The house smelled like rosemary and wine, and everyone kept congratulating me on finishing my biochemistry degree. Claire, my 25-year-old sister, smiled sweetly at me across the table, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her engagement ring catching the light as she reached for her wine glass. She'd always been the golden child, Harvard MBA, junior partner at a consulting firm, engaged to a surgeon, everything our parents had dreamed of. What none of them knew was that Claire had broken into my apartment 2 days earlier while I was at my graduation ceremony. She'd used the spare key I'd stupidly given her months ago for emergencies, and she'd gone through everything. My desk drawers, my closet, my bedside table. She'd found the journal where I'd written about struggling with anxiety, about feeling inadequate compared to her achievements, about questioning whether I even wanted to work in pharmaceuticals like our father expected. Private thoughts I'd never intended anyone to see. The betrayal began right after my father's toast. He'd just finished praising both his children when Claire cleared her throat, her voice carrying that particular sweetness that always preceded something cruel. "Speaking of Ethan's future," she said, pulling a leather-bound notebook from her designer purse, "I think everyone should know what he really thinks about this family." My stomach dropped. I recognized that journal immediately, the one I'd hidden in the back of my drawer beneath old textbooks. "Claire, don't—" "Oh, but Ethan," she interrupted, opening to a bookmarked page. "You wrote such interesting things. Let me share." Her voice took on a mocking tone as she read aloud. "Sometimes I look at Claire's perfect life and feel like I'm drowning. Nothing I do will ever be enough for Mom and Dad. They look at me and see disappointment." The table fell silent. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's face hardened in that way that meant he was furious but controlling it for the guests. Aunt Patricia gasped softly. "There's more," Claire continued, her smile widening. "Here's a good one. I don't even want to work in pharmaceuticals. I hate the corporate world Dad loves so much. But how do I tell him that without proving I'm the failure he already thinks I am?" "That's private," I managed, my voice shaking with humiliation and rage. "You had no right." "No right?" Claire snapped, dropping the sweet act. "You've been secretly resenting this family while we paid for your education, supported you, celebrated you. Everyone deserves to know who you really are, Ethan. A spoiled, ungrateful child who—" "Enough." My father's voice cut through the room like a blade. He turned to me, his eyes cold with disappointment I'd spent my whole life trying to avoid. "Is this true? Everything she read?" 20 pairs of eyes fixed on me. My grandmother looked hurt. My Uncle Jerome shook his head. My younger cousins stared with the fascination of witnesses to a car crash. The walls felt like they were closing in, the room suddenly too hot, too small, too full of judgment. "It's from a private journal," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "Everyone has doubts sometimes." "You humiliated your mother and me," my father interrupted. "After everything we've done for you, the tuition, the connections, the opportunities." He stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. "I think you should leave." My mother wouldn't look at me. She just dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, while Claire rubbed her shoulder comfortingly, playing the role of supportive daughter perfectly. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," Claire said softly to our parents, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I just couldn't keep this from you any longer. Families should be honest with each other." I left that house with my entire extended family watching, their faces ranging from pity to disgust to satisfaction at the drama. Claire called after me as I reached my car. "Maybe now you'll learn some respect, little brother. Not everything is about you and your feelings." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The humiliation was too overwhelming. The betrayal too fresh. I just drove back to my apartment in silence, my hands trembling on the wheel. But here's what Claire didn't know, what no one in that dining room knew. I'm a biochemistry graduate, yes, but my real talent has always been observation and documentation. For the past 6 months, ever since I'd noticed discrepancies in Claire's perfect life, I'd been quietly investigating, and the folder on my laptop labeled CRM Financial Records contained evidence that would unravel everything she'd built. She wanted to destroy me with my private thoughts. I was about to destroy her with her own documented crimes. The drive back to my apartment felt endless, my mind replaying Claire's voice, reading my private thoughts to my entire family. My phone kept buzzing with messages, cousins asking if I was okay, Aunt Patricia defending my father's reaction, Uncle Jerome surprisingly telling me everyone has doubts. I ignored them all except one from Brian Walsh, my best friend since freshman year. "Dude, what happened? Your mom just called mine crying." I texted back, "Claire happened. I'll explain tomorrow." Inside my apartment, I went straight to my desk and opened my laptop. The folder was exactly where I'd left it, hidden behind layers of innocuous-looking biochemistry research files. 6 months of work, 6 months of quietly following digital trails that Claire had been careless enough to leave. It started accidentally. Back in November, I'd borrowed Claire's laptop when mine was being repaired. She'd left her email open, and I'd noticed messages from her consulting firm's CFO with subject lines that seemed odd. Q3 reallocation verification needed, and client billing discrepancy, urgent. I'm not naturally suspicious, but something about the tone felt wrong. The CFO wasn't asking questions. He was telling Claire to verify things she should have already known about. I'd mentioned it casually at Thanksgiving dinner. "Hey Claire, is everything okay at work? Saw some emails about billing issues?" Her reaction was immediate and extreme. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "You went through my private emails? What's wrong with you, Ethan?" She'd made such a scene that I ended up apologizing, and our parents had lectured me about respecting boundaries. But her overreaction told me I'd touched a nerve. So I started looking closer, not hacking, I'm not a criminal, but paying attention to things she left visible. Her social media check-ins didn't match the business trips she claimed to be taking. She posted photos from Boston restaurants on nights she'd told our parents she was in Chicago for client meetings. Her engagement ring was far more expensive than her fiancé could afford on a resident's salary. She drove a brand new BMW when her salary, even as a junior partner, shouldn't have covered both that and her luxury apartment. Then I found her second phone. She'd left it in her coat pocket during a family dinner in January, and it had buzzed repeatedly. When I glanced at the screen while hanging up her coat, I saw messages from someone named D talking about next transfer and keeping things clean. The messages disappeared almost as fast as they arrived, some kind of auto-delete app. That's when I realized my sister wasn't just successful, she was stealing. Over the next 4 months, I documented everything. I created a timeline of her claimed business trips versus her actual locations based on social media metadata. I screenshot every inconsistency before she could delete posts. I recorded conversations where she contradicted herself about client meetings. When she'd carelessly left her work laptop open during Easter dinner, I'd photographed several emails visible on her screen, emails showing she'd been billing clients for hours she hadn't worked, inflating expense reports, and funneling money through a complex system of fake vendor accounts. The most damning evidence came from her own arrogance. In March, she'd asked me to help her set up a new external hard drive because she didn't trust cloud storage for sensitive work files. I'd helped her, and she'd never thought to change the default admin password. 2 weeks ago, I'd cloned that drive while she was showering at our parents' house after a Sunday dinner. The files I found were staggering. Spreadsheets tracking over $200,000 in fraudulent billing over 18 months, communications with D, whose real name was Derek Chen, a former colleague who'd been fired for ethics violations, and detailed plans to extract even more before her wedding in August, after which she planned to take maternity leave and let someone else discover the discrepancies. She'd been clever, spreading the theft across multiple clients in small amounts that wouldn't trigger immediate audits. But she'd also been arrogant enough to keep meticulous records, probably planning to use them as leverage if Derek ever tried to blackmail her. Now, sitting at my desk with my family's rejection still burning in my chest, I opened those files and began organizing them into something presentable. Not for my parents. They'd never believe me over Claire. Not for the police yet. I needed more leverage first. But for her firm's CFO, The man who'd already been asking questions 6 months ago. My phone rang. Claire's number. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. On the third call, I answered. What do you want? Just checking that you got home safely. Her voice was saccharine, false concern dripping from every word. I know today was hard for you, Ethan. Sometimes the truth hurts. You broke into my apartment and violated my privacy. I used a key you gave me. And honestly, someone needed to tell Mom and Dad how you really feel about them. They've sacrificed so much for you. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Maybe this will teach you some humility. Not everyone gets to coast on mediocrity like you have. Something in me snapped. You know what's funny, Claire? I did give you that key for emergencies. Just like you left your work laptop open during Easter. Just like you asked me to set up that external hard drive with all your sensitive work files. We both made mistakes trusting each other. The silence on her end stretched for 3 seconds too long. What are you talking about? Nothing. Just thinking out loud. I kept my voice casual, almost bored. Enjoy your perfect life, Claire. I'm sure it'll last forever. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From anticipation. Within 10 minutes, she called again. I didn't answer. She texted, "What did you mean about my work files?" I replied, "Same thing you meant when you read my private journal. Family should be honest with each other, right?" Your words. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Ethan, if you touched anything on my computer, that's illegal. I could have you arrested. I smiled at my phone screen. Interesting threat from someone who broke into my apartment. Let's both hope our secrets stay private. Good night, Claire. I turned off my phone and went back to organizing files. By midnight, I had everything sorted into 3 neat folders: financial evidence, communications, and timeline documentation. Each piece was labeled, dated, and cross-referenced. I'd learned something valuable from my biochemistry labs. Good documentation was everything, but I wasn't ready to move yet. Claire needed to feel secure first, needed to believe her outburst at dinner had successfully destroyed my credibility with our family. Only then would she make the mistake I was waiting for. The week after the dinner was carefully calculated silence. I didn't contact my parents, didn't respond to Claire's increasingly aggressive messages demanding to know what I'd meant about her files. I went to my part-time lab assistant job, came home, and waited. Brian came over twice, bringing food and asking questions I deflected. Just family drama, I told him. It'll blow over. But I wasn't waiting for things to blow over. I was waiting for Claire to make her next move. It came on Thursday evening. I was reviewing chromatography data when my apartment door burst open. Claire must have made a copy of that spare key before I could ask for it back. She stormed in, her designer heels clicking sharply on my cheap laminate flooring, her face flushed with anger that she'd clearly been holding back for days. "Where is it?" she demanded. "Where's my hard drive?" I turned slowly in my desk chair, keeping my expression neutral. "Hello to you too. Breaking and entering twice in 1 month? That's ambitious. Don't play games with me, Ethan. My backup drive is missing from my apartment. The one you set up." Her voice was shaking now, fear bleeding through the anger. "What did you do with it?" "I don't have your hard drive, Claire. Why would I?" "Because you made some cryptic threat about my work files and now they're gone." She crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing my laptop off the desk. "What's on here?" I stood up, and something in my movement made her step back. I'm 6 inches taller than Claire, something I'd never used as intimidation before. But watching her clutch my laptop while trying to maintain her authority, I realized she was genuinely frightened. "Good." "Put it down," I said quietly. "You're already guilty of breaking into my home twice. Do you really want to add theft to that?" "Guilty?" She laughed, but it came out too high-pitched. "You're the one stealing from me. Those are my private work files that you asked me to help you set up, that you stored in my apartment for 2 weeks because you said your place was too small for extra equipment, that you accessed using a password I set up." I took a step toward her. "Legally, any data I accessed during the setup process isn't theft. I was the administrator, but I'm sure your firm's legal team would have interesting opinions about what's actually on those files." She set my laptop down carefully, her hand trembling. "You don't know what you're talking about. Derek Chen. $247,000 in fraudulent billing over 18 months. Fake vendor accounts under variations of your middle name. Claire Marie Moreau, using Marie Services LLC, CM Consulting, Moreau and Associates. I watched the color drain from her face. Should I continue? You're bluffing. Am I? I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and showed her a screenshot of one of her spreadsheets. This is just one example. I have 63 pages of documentation, emails, financial records, timeline correlations. I even have the messages between you and Derek discussing how you'd frame your maternity leave as the perfect exit strategy. Claire sank into my desk chair, her perfect composure finally cracking. Ethan, please. You don't understand. The firm was underpaying me for years. I deserved that money. I worked twice as hard as any of the male partners. So you committed fraud. I cut her off. You didn't fight for fair pay. You didn't report discrimination. You stole from clients and blamed it on billing errors. What do you want? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Money? I can pay you. $50,000. That's everything I've saved for the wedding, but I don't want your money, Claire. I sat on the edge of my bed facing her. I want you to understand what you did to me last Sunday. You humiliated me in front of 20 people because you thought reading my private thoughts would make you look better by comparison. You violated my privacy, destroyed my relationship with our parents, and did it with a smile on your face. I'm sorry, she said quickly, desperately. I'll tell them I was wrong. I'll say I misunderstood what I read. We can fix this. No, we can't, because Mom and Dad will never look at me the same way again. You made sure of that. I leaned forward. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to your firm's CFO, what's his name? Richard Kowalski? And you're going to confess everything. The fraud, Derek's involvement, all of it. Are you insane? They'll prosecute me. I'll lose my job, my reputation, my... She stopped, realization dawning. You want me to lose everything? No, Claire. I want you to take responsibility for what you've done before someone else discovers it and you take down innocent people with you. I pulled up another file on my phone. Your firm is about to acquire Breslin Analytics. That's your biggest client, the one you've been stealing from the most. When the due diligence team goes through Breslin's records during acquisition, they're going to find the discrepancies. And they're going to find that junior partners had access to those accounts. Right now, that includes you and 3 other people. Her face went white. Oh my God. If you confess now, you control the narrative. You're contrite. You're dealing with personal issues. You're taking responsibility. The firm might even agree to quiet restitution instead of criminal charges to avoid scandal during the acquisition. I stood up. But if I send this documentation to Richard Kowalski, along with evidence that you've known about the acquisition for 6 weeks and haven't said anything, you're not just guilty of fraud. You're guilty of sabotaging a $100 million deal. When did you become so ruthless? She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. You're my brother, and you were my sister. Past tense. I walked to the door and opened it. You have until Monday morning to make a decision. Either you confess to Richard or I send him everything I have plus a detailed analysis of how your fraud could impact the Breslin acquisition. Your choice. She stood on shaking legs, grabbed her purse, and walked to the door. Before stepping through, she turned back. Mom and Dad will hate you for this. The whole family will. Maybe. But at least I'll be able to sleep at night. I met her eyes. Can you say the same? She left without answering, and I closed the door behind her, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't over yet. Claire was cornered, and cornered people were dangerous. But for the first time since Sunday's dinner, I felt like I could breathe. Friday morning, I called the one person who might understand what I was doing. Brian's father, James Walsh, a former federal prosecutor turned defense attorney. I'd known him since I was 18, and he'd always told me to call if I ever needed legal advice. Mr. Walsh, it's Ethan Moreau. I need to talk to you about something sensitive. His response was immediate. Come to my office. 1 hour. James Walsh's office overlooked Boston Harbor, all dark wood and leather furniture that spoke of success built over decades. He listened to my entire story without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "You've put yourself in a precarious position," he said finally. "If Claire goes to the police and claims you hacked her computer, it becomes your word against hers about whether you had permission to access those files." "I know, but I didn't hack anything. I used credentials I set up legitimately. That's a thin legal line, Ethan." He tapped his pen against the pad. "However, if she reports you, she also has to explain why you were accessing work files that contain evidence of fraud. That exposure alone might keep her from involving law enforcement." "So what should I do?" He leaned forward. "You're giving her until Monday to confess. That's smart. Shows you gave her an opportunity to do the right thing before escalating. But you need insurance. Send a sealed letter to my office today containing copies of all your evidence and a detailed timeline of events. If anything happens to you or if Claire tries to flip this around, I'll have documented proof of when you gathered this information and why. Won't that make you complicit?" "No. Attorney-client privilege means I can't act on information you tell me in confidence unless you authorize it or there's imminent danger to someone. But I can hold sealed evidence with instructions to open it only under specific circumstances." He smiled slightly. "It's called a protective disclosure. Insurance for whistleblowers." I left his office 2 hours later with detailed instructions and a recording of our conversation on my phone. Mr. Walsh had insisted on the recording, saying it established a clear timeline of my intentions. The sealed envelope went to his office by courier that afternoon, containing a USB drive with everything I'd compiled plus a notarized statement explaining how and when I'd gathered each piece of evidence. Saturday and Sunday were agonizing. Claire didn't call or text. My parents didn't reach out either. Apparently, the family disgrace wasn't worth checking on. Only Brian kept me company, bringing pizza and terrible action movies, asking no questions but providing solid, silent support that reminded me why we'd been friends for 4 years. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and rain that matched my nervous energy. I went to my lab job like normal, but I couldn't focus on anything except my phone. Would Claire confess? Would she call my bluff? Would she try something else entirely? At 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Moreau? This is Richard Kowalski from Meridian Consulting. I need to speak with you about Claire Moreau. Can you come to our offices this afternoon?" My mouth went dry. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "Your sister came to my office this morning with some serious allegations about billing irregularities. Your name came up as someone who might have relevant information." His tone was professionally neutral, impossible to read. 2 p.m. today. The address is, I know where your offices are. I'll be there." I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes after hanging up, my mind racing. Claire had confessed. She'd actually done it. But she'd mentioned my name. Was she trying to implicate me somehow? Blame me for discovering the fraud? At 1:45 p.m., I walked into Meridian Consulting's glass tower in downtown Boston, wearing the only suit I owned, the one I'd bought for graduation. Richard Kowalski's assistant led me to a conference room where 3 people waited. Kowalski himself, a severe-looking woman introduced as their head of legal, and a younger man with a laptop who wasn't introduced at all. "Thank you for coming on short notice," Kowalski began. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of calm intensity that came from years of managing crises. "Your sister spent 3 hours with us this morning confessing to fraudulent billing practices spanning 18 months. She claimed you discovered the irregularities and confronted her last week. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir." "How did you discover them?" I explained carefully, sticking to the facts. The accidentally seen emails in November, the suspicious travel patterns, the external hard drive I'd helped set up, the cloned data. I didn't mention Sunday's dinner or Claire's invasion of my privacy. That would sound like revenge, and I needed this to sound like concerned civic duty. The legal department woman, her name was Patricia Chen, took detailed notes. "Did you access Ms. Moreau's computer without her permission?" "No, ma'am. She asked me to set up her backup system and gave me administrator access. I created the login credentials she used. I accessed the external hard drive only after noticing discrepancies that suggested fraud." "And you didn't think to report this to us immediately?" "I wasn't sure who to report it to or if I had enough evidence to be taken seriously. Claire was a respected junior partner. I'm a recent college graduate with no professional standing. I met her eyes. I was also hoping I was wrong. She's my sister. Kowalski nodded slowly. Claire provided us with a full confession, including communications with Derek Chen. She's agreed to make full restitution and resign immediately. We're deciding now whether to pursue criminal charges or handle this quietly. The Breslin acquisition, I said quietly. If this becomes public during due diligence. You're aware of that? Patricia Chen interrupted sharply. Claire mentioned working with Breslin frequently. I pay attention to business news. I kept my voice level. I assumed timing matters for something that significant. The three of them exchanged glances. Finally, Kowalski spoke again. We appreciate you encouraging your sister to come forward, Mr. Moreau. It shows integrity, especially given that exposing her likely damaged your own family relationships. She damaged those relationships before I exposed anything, sir. I just made sure the damage didn't spread to innocent people. He stood, extending his hand. We'll be in touch if we need any additional information. In the meantime, this conversation remains confidential. I shook his hand and left, my legs trembling as I walked back to my car. It was done. Claire had confessed, and the firm was handling it internally. No criminal charges, yet, but her career was over. Her reputation was destroyed, and everyone at that firm would know exactly why. That evening, my phone rang. My mother. Ethan, we need to talk. My mother's voice was ice cold, the tone she'd used when I was 12 and she'd caught me lying about breaking her favorite vase. I sat in my car in the Meridian Consulting parking lot, rain drumming on the roof, and waited for the lecture I knew was coming. Do you have any idea what you've done to your sister? She didn't wait for an answer. Claire called me this afternoon, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She's lost her job, Ethan. Her career is ruined, and all because you went snooping through her private work files and she stole over $200,000 from her clients. I kept my voice flat, emotionless. She committed fraud for 18 months. She was going to let 3 other junior partners take the blame when it was discovered. That's not... She said she made some billing mistakes and you blew them out of proportion because you were angry about Sunday dinner. You weaponized her minor errors to destroy her life. Minor errors? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Mom, she confessed everything to her firm this morning. She admitted to systematic fraud. Those aren't my words. They're hers. Silence stretched for 5 seconds. Then, she only confessed because you threatened to ruin her wedding, to destroy her reputation, Her voice cracked. She said you told her you'd make sure she went to prison if she didn't humiliate herself by confessing to crimes she didn't commit. She's lying to you. No, Ethan, you're lying. Claire has always been the responsible one, the successful one, and you've always been jealous of her. This is just you finally finding a way to tear her down to your level. The words hit like physical blows. My own mother, choosing Claire's lies over my truth. Exactly what I'd predicted, exactly what I'd prepared for. But it still hurt more than I'd expected. Okay, I said quietly. If that's what you believe, then there's nothing I can say to change your mind. Don't you dare take that martyr tone with me. Her anger was building now, years of preferential treatment toward Claire finally showing its foundation. Your father and I gave you every advantage. The best education, support, love, and this is how you repay us? By destroying your sister's life out of spite? Is Dad there with you? He won't speak to you. Neither will I after this call. We've decided that until you apologize to Claire and make this right, you're not welcome in our home. Something inside me, some last fragile hope that my parents might eventually understand, finally broke. Fine. Then you should know the truth since I won't have another chance to tell you. Claire read my private journal and humiliated me in front of the entire family to distract from her own crimes. She broke into my apartment twice to steal evidence. She violated my privacy, my trust, and every boundary a sibling should respect. And when I gave her a chance to confess before I exposed her, she chose to save herself and lie to you about it. We're done here, my mother said. When you're ready to be an adult and take responsibility for your jealousy, you can call us. Until then, don't contact me or your father. She hung up. I sat in the rain-soaked parking lot, staring at my phone's blank screen, and felt absolutely nothing. The hurt would come later, I knew. Right now, I was just numb. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. See." I deleted it without responding. Then another message, this time from my father's number. "Your mother is devastated. Claire is devastated. We raised you better than this. Don't contact us again until you're ready to apologize and fix what you broke." I turned off my phone. The drive back to my apartment was mechanical, my hands steering while my brain processed the fact that I was now effectively orphaned by choice. My parents' choice to believe Claire's version of events over mine, to prioritize her devastation over my humiliation, to maintain their image of their perfect daughter at any cost. Brian was waiting outside my apartment, sitting on the steps under an umbrella, 2 coffee cups beside him. He stood when he saw me. "Your mom called my mom," he said simply. "Told her you'd lost your mind and ruined Claire's life. My mom asked me if I knew what was happening. I said I knew enough." He handed me one of the coffees. "Want to tell me the rest?" Inside, I told him everything. The journal, the dinner, the investigation, the evidence, the confession, the phone call with my mother. Brian listened without interrupting, his expression darkening as the story unfolded. "Your sister is a sociopath," he said when I finished. "And your parents are enabling her. You know that, right? I know they love her more." The words came out easier than I'd expected, probably because I'd known them to be true for years but had never said them out loud. They always have. Claire was the firstborn, the achiever, the one who did everything right. I was the accident baby who came along 5 years later and never quite measured up. That's not... It is, Brian. And it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but I understand it now. I sank onto my couch, suddenly exhausted. I spent my whole life trying to make them proud of me the way they're proud of Claire. Straight A's, scholarship to college, biochemistry degree with honors. And none of it mattered, because I wasn't Claire. So what happens now? Now, Claire's career is over. My family won't speak to me. And I have to figure out how to be okay with both of those things. I looked at my best friend, the one person who'd stood by me through this entire mess. "Thanks for being here. Always, man." He stood up. "But I'm not leaving you alone tonight. I'm crashing on your couch, we're ordering terrible Chinese food, and we're watching movies until you pass out. Non-negotiable." For the first time in a week, I smiled. Tuesday morning brought the consequences I'd been expecting. My phone, turned back on, showed 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. Cousins who'd been at Sunday's dinner had heard about Claire losing her job. Aunt Patricia sent a long message about family loyalty and how disappointed she was in me. Uncle Jerome, surprisingly, sent a brief text. "Family is complicated. Don't let them make you the villain for telling the truth." But the call that mattered came at 9:23 a.m. from Richard Kowalski. "Mr. Moreau, I wanted to update you on our decision regarding your sister's case. After reviewing the evidence and consulting with our legal team, we've decided to handle this internally. Claire will make full restitution, resign immediately, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges." "Why not?" I couldn't help asking. "She stole almost $250,000. Because pursuing charges would require disclosing the fraud to Breslin Analytics during due diligence, which would likely kill the acquisition and cost hundreds of people their jobs. It's a pragmatic decision, not a moral one." He paused. "However, the legal community is small, Mr. Moreau. Claire will never work in consulting again, possibly never work in any position of financial responsibility. Her professional reputation is effectively destroyed. And Derek Chen? His involvement makes him liable for conspiracy charges. We're forwarding that information to the district attorney's office. Unlike your sister, he has no leverage to negotiate with." After we hung up, I sat with that information for a long time. Claire wouldn't go to prison, but her career was over. Derek would likely face criminal charges. And the 3 innocent junior partners who would have been investigated had been spared. I'd accomplished exactly what I'd set out to do. So why did it feel so hollow? The answer to that question came 3 days later when Claire showed up at my apartment at 7 in the morning, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore sweatpants and an old college hoodie, nothing like the designer outfits she usually favored. Her engagement ring was missing. "We need to talk," she said when I opened the door. "I don't think we have anything to say to each other. Please." Her voice broke on the word. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on my couch, hands twisted together in her lap, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. It was probably manipulation. Claire was excellent at manipulation, but I waited anyway. David broke off our engagement, she said finally. When he found out about the fraud, he said he couldn't marry someone who'd lied to him for 18 months. His parents are both attorneys, and they were horrified. She laughed bitterly. The Chens don't associate with criminals. You told David you made billing mistakes. You told Mom and Dad I blew minor errors out of proportion. Now you're admitting it was fraud? Does it matter what I call it? She looked up, and her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, like she'd cried herself out days ago. My career is over. My fiancé is gone. I can't show my face at family gatherings because everyone knows what I did. You won, Ethan. You completely destroyed my life. I gave you a chance to confess before I exposed you, I said quietly. You made the choice to commit fraud. You made the choice to throw Derek under the bus to save yourself. You made the choice to lie to our parents about what really happened. Those were your decisions, Claire, not mine. You could have come to me privately. We could have figured something out, like you came to me privately about my journal. The anger I'd been suppressing for 2 weeks finally broke through. You broke into my apartment, stole my most private thoughts, and read them aloud to 20 people to humiliate me. You didn't give me a chance to explain or defend myself. You just destroyed me for sport because you could. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I was angry. You'd always been Mom and Dad's baby. Always gotten away with things I never could. You got to explore environmental science when they forced me into business. You got to take your time figuring out what you wanted when I had to be perfect from day one. I resented you for having the freedom I never had. So you punished me for it. Yes, she met my eyes. And you punished me back. So now we're even. We're not even, Claire. I sat in the chair across from her, maintaining distance. You humiliated me because you were jealous. I exposed you because you were committing crimes that would have destroyed innocent people's careers. Those aren't equivalent, aren't they? She leaned forward. You didn't expose me to protect those junior partners. You exposed me for revenge because I hurt you and you wanted me to hurt more. At least be honest about that. She was right, and we both knew it. Part of my motivation had been protecting the innocent. But a larger part had been making Claire feel the devastation she'd made me feel. I'd wanted her to lose everything the way I'd lost my family's respect. I'd wanted her perfect life to crumble. Fine, I admitted. I wanted revenge. But unlike you, I didn't fabricate evidence or lie about what happened. Everything I exposed was true. Everything you did to me was a violation of privacy and trust, and everything you did to me was within your legal rights. Claire stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. That's the difference between us. You found a righteous way to destroy me, while I just destroyed you out of spite. She walked to the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I am sorry about the journal. I shouldn't have read it, and I definitely shouldn't have shared it. That was cruel. Yes, it was. Are you going to accept my apology? I thought about it for a long moment. About the little girl who'd taught me to ride a bike when I was 5. About the teenager who'd defended me from bullies in middle school. About the young woman who'd helped me move into my first apartment. About all the years before jealousy and competition had poisoned our relationship. No, I said finally. Because you're not really sorry. You're sorry you got caught and lost everything. If none of this had happened, if I hadn't found your fraud, if you'd successfully humiliated me without consequences, you'd do it again in a heartbeat. She didn't deny it. She just nodded slowly and left. I never saw my sister again. The following week brought the fallout I'd been expecting. My mother called once more, this time crying, begging me to tell the consulting firm I'd made a mistake, that I'd misunderstood what I'd seen on Claire's computer. When I refused, she told me I was dead to her and hung up. My father sent a single email. You've destroyed this family. I hope you can live with that. Cousins took sides. Aunt Patricia stopped speaking to me. Uncle Jerome invited me to lunch and told me quietly that he'd suspected something was wrong with Claire's finances for months but had no proof. You did the right thing, he said, but the right thing isn't always the popular thing. Brian's family, surprisingly, rallied around me. His mother brought me groceries. His father offered legal advice if my parents tried anything. Brian himself continued to show up at my apartment with food and friendship, never asking for explanations or apologies, just being present. My lab job became my refuge. I threw myself into research, working late hours, volunteering for extra projects. The department head noticed and offered me a position in his graduate program starting in the fall, a full scholarship plus stipend, studying environmental impact of pharmaceutical waste. Exactly what I'd written about in that journal Claire had violated. 3 weeks after Claire's confession, I received a certified letter from Meridian Consulting's legal department. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a brief note from Richard Kowalski. Reward for reporting internal fraud. Your integrity potentially saved us millions in liability during the Breslin acquisition. Should you need a reference for graduate school or future employment, please don't hesitate to contact me. I deposited the check and used part of it to hire a locksmith to change every lock in my apartment, then gave no one a spare key. Not even Brian. That night, I took out the journal Claire had stolen and read through it again. All those doubts about living up to my parents' expectations, all those fears about disappointing them, all that anxiety about never being as successful as my sister. Reading it now felt like looking at a stranger's words. That person who'd written those entries had desperately wanted his family's approval. The person I'd become no longer needed it. I tore out every page, methodically shredding them into tiny pieces. Then I bought a new journal and wrote a single entry on the first page. Today, I decided that being honest is worth more than being loved by people who only love the version of you that's convenient for them. 6 months later, I stood in the chemistry building at MIT, preparing for my first presentation as a graduate student in environmental toxicology. My research focused on pharmaceutical contamination in watersheds, the very topic that had caused so many arguments with my father, who'd called it tree hugger nonsense and a waste of my degree. Brian sat in the third row, giving me a thumbs up. Beside him was Mr. Walsh, who'd become an unexpected mentor over the past months, occasionally inviting me to his house for dinner and treating me with the paternal warmth my own father had withdrawn. 2 of my lab colleagues sat in the front row, ready with their own presentations. My family wasn't there. I hadn't expected them to be. The presentation went well. My advisor, Dr. Rebecca Lynn, praised my methodology afterward. A professor from Harvard asked if I'd be interested in a joint research project. Someone from the EPA requested my contact information for a potential summer internship. As I packed up my materials, my phone buzzed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. Claire Moreau, 1024@gmail. Combauer. The subject line read, "I thought you should know." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Ethan, I don't expect you to respond to this. I'm writing because Mom told me you're presenting at MIT today, and I wanted you to hear this from me before you heard it through the family gossip chain. I've been in therapy for 4 months. My therapist thinks I have some personality traits associated with narcissism, need for admiration, lack of empathy, entitlement. I'm working on it, but it's hard to face what I've done. I got a job as a billing clerk at a small accounting firm. It's humiliating after being a junior partner, but it's honest work, and I'm grateful they hired me despite my record. I'm paying restitution to Meridian at $1,000 per month. It'll take me 18 years to pay it all back. Derek went to prison, 6 months for fraud conspiracy. He got out last week and immediately posted on social media, blaming me for everything, saying I seduced him into helping me, and then turned on him to save myself. Some of that's true. I did use him, and I did sacrifice him when it benefited me. I'm not proud of that. David married someone else 3 months ago. I saw the announcement on Facebook. Her name is Jennifer, she's a pediatric nurse, and she looks genuinely kind. He probably dodged a bullet by not marrying me. Mom and Dad still won't talk about what I actually did. They've created this narrative where you misunderstood some billing issues and overreacted because you were hurt about the journal incident. It's easier for them than admitting their perfect daughter is a criminal. I've stopped trying to convince them otherwise. I don't blame you for what happened. You gave me a chance to confess, and I took it because I knew you had me cornered. If you hadn't caught me, I would have kept stealing until I got caught in a much worse way. So in a twisted way, you probably saved me from prison. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did. And I hope your presentation goes well today. Mom mentioned you're studying environmental contamination. The thing you always wanted to research. At least one of us got to live the life we actually wanted. Claire. I read it twice, then closed my laptop without responding. Maybe in another 10 years I'd be ready to have a conversation with my sister about accountability and change. Maybe not. Either way, it wasn't today. Everything okay? Brian asked, walking over. Yeah, just Claire being Claire. Want to grab food and celebrate your presentation? My treat. Actually, there's something I need to do first. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts to a number I hadn't called in months. Uncle Jerome answered on the second ring. Ethan, I was just thinking about you. How'd the presentation go? Really well, actually. I wanted to thank you for the recommendation letter you sent to MIT. My advisor mentioned it was one of the strongest she'd received. You earned it, kid. Your parents might not see it, but you've got real integrity. That's rare. He paused. Are you doing okay? Patricia mentioned you're not coming to Thanksgiving at your parents' house. I wasn't invited, but I'm doing fine, Uncle Jerome. Better than fine, actually. I looked around the chemistry building, at the research posters covering the walls, at the graduate students discussing their work. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Good. That's real good. I could hear the smile in his voice. Listen, my family's having a small Thanksgiving at our place. Just us and a few friends. You'd be welcome if you want to come. No pressure. I'd like that. Thanks. After we hung up, Brian and I walked to our favorite Thai place near campus, the one we discovered during my first week as a graduate student. Over pad thai and spring rolls, he asked the question he'd been avoiding for 6 months. Do you regret it? Exposing Claire? I thought about it carefully. I regret that it destroyed my relationship with my parents. I regret that family gatherings will always be awkward now. But do I regret stopping her from stealing and potentially ruining innocent people's careers? No. I don't regret that at all. Even though it cost you your family, it cost me people who only loved me when I was convenient and compliant, I corrected. The family I've built here, you, your parents, Uncle Jerome, my advisor, my lab colleagues, those are people who value me for who I am, not for who they want me to be. Brian raised his water glass. To new families. I clinked my glass against his. To new families. That night, alone in my apartment, the same one where Claire had violated my privacy, where she'd later confessed her crimes, I took out my journal and wrote, Today I presented research that matters to me, surrounded by people who respect my choices. My sister sent an email that might have been genuine accountability or might have been another manipulation. I honestly don't know, and I've made peace with not knowing. My parents still believe I'm the villain in this story, and I've made peace with that too. Sometimes being honest means losing people you love. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone. Sometimes revenge and justice are two sides of the same coin, and you can't always tell which one you're holding. But I can look myself in the mirror now without shame. I can pursue work I'm passionate about without guilt. I can build relationships based on honesty instead of obligation. Claire wanted to destroy me by exposing my doubts and insecurities. Instead, she freed me from caring what people think when I know I've done what's right. She lost everything trying to humiliate me. Her career, her fiancé, her reputation, her family's unconditional support. I lost a family that loved me conditionally and gained the freedom to become someone I actually respect. In the end, I didn't just get revenge. I got something better. I got myself back. I closed the journal and put it in my desk drawer, unlocked this time, because I no longer had anything to hide and no one left who would violate my privacy to hurt me. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. Forgot to mention, my mom's making her famous apple pie tomorrow. You're coming to dinner. Non-negotiable. I smiled and texted back. Wouldn't miss it. Outside my window, Boston glittered with evening lights, full of possibility and new beginnings. Somewhere in this city, Claire was probably working late at her billing clerk job, paying back the money she'd stolen, building a different life from the one she'd destroyed. Somewhere else, my parents were probably having dinner, maintaining their comfortable fiction about what had really happened. But here, in my small apartment filled with research papers and chemistry textbooks, I was finally, genuinely happy. Not because I'd destroyed my sister, though she had deserved the consequences of her actions, but because I'd refused to let her destroy me. That was the real victory. Not revenge, but survival. Not justice, but freedom, and that was more than enough.